Hi, all. Welcome to week 9. I think that we have all know by now that the weeks going forward are going to be a little bit different. We're going to be getting together virtually. So this is our first shot at it. So this week we're going to cover chapter 7 and 8, communication climates, as well as culture and social communities. On the agenda was to finish the final speeches this week. We did finish the in-class speeches. Some other folks need to make those up as well. We might also have some speech videos, and with the permission of the speakers, I might or they might post those on YouTube, and again, with their permission, we can check those out, maybe do a little bit of peer review, positive peer review, and we'll talk more about the speeches on the whole this week. Also, of course, we're going to discuss more of the details about the online class. As I said to you guys yesterday, at least those who are able to attend, my intent is to keep the class as much as it was originally put together, and there's going to be some slight modifications. For instance, I'm going to take some of the points, not a lot, from the remaining 2 tests and move them into the discussion, about 50 points. Otherwise, most of the assignments and assessments are going to be the same. The term paper isn't going to change at all. That's due at the end of the term, and it's a theory-based paper. And in fact, my expectations for that are probably going to be a little bit higher now that we don't need to spend time coming and going to class and spending that hour plus that we did 3 days a week. So more details on that, but we're going to make it work. And please do your part. There's a little more responsibility on your end to stay engaged and stay on top of things. And so we'll look forward to that. So again, we're going to talk about communication climates and culture and social communities in this presentation. And we'll continue the discussion in the course web about these topics and others this week. So what are just kind of an overview of communication climates? We're talking about levels of confirmation and disconfirmation, which include recognition, acknowledgement, endorsement. We're also talking about defensive and supportive climates, which include evaluation versus description, certainty versus provincialism, strategy versus spontaneity, control versus problem orientation, neutrality versus empathy, and superiority versus equality. We're also going to talk about conflict and communication. There's different kinds, overt and covert. There's components of that as well, and there's what's called third-party assistance. And I'm noticing that the vid covers some of the text. I apologize for that, but I'm also going to upload just the slides alone, so you're going to have access to the full text of these slides. I should add that, as usual, and probably more important than ever, you should be doing the chapter readings from the textbook. Please don't just rely on these slides or our discussions. It's your performance on the exams and the quizzes is going to be much better if you have the text, if you've done the text readings. And then, as usual, the author offers some suggestions for having healthy communication climates, which includes confirming others, confirming yourself, respecting diversity, etc. The overview for culture and social communities involves understanding cultures and social communities, seeing that they're systems. You've heard that term before, knowing that there's multiple, very different cultures. There's different dimensions to cultures. And what this is all about is talking about diversity and different perspectives. There's a clear relationship between culture and communication. We learn culture in the process. Cultural values, communication sustains culture, and it also helps culture to change. We'd like to adapt our communication. We want to make sure that our communication is person-centered. That came up early in the class. We want to take into account other people's feelings and ideas. We want to avoid what's called ethnocentrism. That'll come at the end of this presentation. And adapting to it all is a process. So we all need interpersonal confirmation to be healthy and grow. What is confirmation? Confirmation is the expressed valuing of another person. The reality is that most communication climates are a mix of confirming and disconfirming. Here's a graphic to show that. Confirming climates are sunnier, and disconfirming climates are more overcast and rainy. And you see that in between is really what most climates are a combination of the two. Confirmation and disconfirmation consists of acknowledgement, recognition, and endorsement. That kind of is on a scale there. People like to be acknowledged for who they are and for what they've done. A step up from that is recognition. Oftentimes that we recognize people for something they've done, their accomplishments, and that feels good to be recognized. And then even beyond that is what's called endorsement. That's when we are fully backing another person. This could, of course, apply to backing a political climate, somebody for a job, etc. There are what's called defensive and supportive climates. This is interesting. So let me just kind of talk for just a couple minutes on this. The first part of these phrases is the defensive side, and the next side, so this is on a bipolar scale, is the more supportive side. We don't like to feel judged, so when we're in a climate of evaluation, that can feel uncomfortable as opposed to a climate that's just descriptive. We're also not real comfortable with climate of certainty. We prefer provincialism, which is not the same as certainty. That's just something that we don't feel comfortable with when a person is has that air of certainty. We also don't like to be manipulated. So when we feel that somebody is trying to be strategic and trying to accomplish something in their communication with us, that doesn't feel good. Spontaneity feels a lot better. Of course, we don't like to be controlled or coerced to anything. If you're with some folks and you need to figure something out, it's much better to have what's called a problem orientation climate. However, neutrality doesn't feel good either. Neutrality, as one as opposed to empathy, and can feel like indifference, and that doesn't feel great. And of course, we would much rather be in a climate that communication climate that feels equal as opposed to superior. Now let's talk for a moment about conflict. Conflict exists when people who depend on each other have different views, interests, values, responsibilities, or objectives, and perceive their differences as incompatible. I would just say that conflicts are a normal part of life. Okay, they have a negative connotation, but they're just a normal part of life, and it's about how that we deal with them that matters. Typically, conflict is a sign that people are involved with each other. That's simply what it means. We have involvement with each other. If they weren't, differences wouldn't matter and wouldn't need to be resolved. Let's leave it up for a moment so you can read that. There's conflict can be overt. It can be out in the open or not. It can be it can be covered. Conflicts also involve what's called conflicts of interest. And then there's different kinds of orientations to conflict. There's lose-lose, there's win-lose, there's win-win. Obviously, we'd all prefer to be in win-win conflicts where all parties involved benefit. This is a graphic just showing how conflict is responded to. It can be on a scale from destructive to constructive and from passive to active. So if you look in the bottom left corner, neglecting a conflict is very passive and very destructive. That's really not, you don't just want to bolt from a situation. You want to try to deal with it. Exiting might be a little more active, but it's a little more destructive as well. Then we see loyalty and voice is really where we all have a voice in the matter, is where we want to be. Conflict outcomes. I'll just point out here, I'm not going to read this whole slide, that a conflict's impact on a relationship is maybe a more significant and enduring outcome than the actual decision. So if a decision comes out of a conflict, that's terrific. But really, the most important thing is how did the relationship come out? Was it damaged? Was it strengthened? That's very important. This is just an activity that we were going to do in class. I'm going to transfer it to the online forum. So just go ahead and read this and just think of yourself, think to yourself what some of the more recent conflicts you were involved in, okay? And we will do a participation or discussion activity soon. And if you can't think of anything, then I'm just wondering what's going on. I know a lot of people are holding up at home, but conflict's just natural. So they come big and small, and they're important, unimportant, but you should be able to think of a few. And then the author suggests ways for healthy communication climates. Confirm others, confirm yourself, respect diversity among people, time the conflict effectively, and it never hurts to show grace. Okay, so this will conclude the first part of this presentation, and when you're ready, please go on to part 2.